Hey everyone, this is Bill McDonald, the reading and writing doctor. Everybody wave hi for a second if you're watching this video. Give me a high five. This is called my hand, and I'm going to teach you several ideas using the same letter that the word palm starts with. The palm is like the center of my hand. So a few things that your students have to think about when they're reading a passage that has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, a beginning, a middle, and an end is what's the purpose? Is it a fiction story like the one we're going to read today? Is it literary nonfiction, argumentative, persuasive? Is it informational? Is it a poem? Is it a play? Today's is going to be the purpose will be a fictional story. So with a story, there's usually a person. The main person in the story, if it's about humans, is the main character. We'll call that person the protagonist. It's like the star of the show. So the star of the show, the person, the protagonist, is very important because everything should be centered, focused on that protagonist. Even the title, when I put a T above my head at the top of a passage, is something called a title, and it helps you understand the topic. Our title today is called Capital, putting a cap on, Peace, and Capital Quiet. And you'll only have to read the first one or two paragraphs when you see that the point of view, the perspective, is from the protagonist named Desha or Desha, I'm not sure, and her brother doesn't come in till later on in the story. So the protagonist, Desha, goes to a certain place, the forest, because she has a problem, which is sometimes known as the plot. What is the plot? And I'll show you a paper from my binder for all of you that have it so that you can look at all the different kinds of plots that a story can have, a play, a poem, because there's sometimes if things are written in the form of stories, then they tend to have a plot, okay? And what point of view is the story? It's written in, if you watch me, first person, okay? Holding up one finger, I, and if you look at my fingers pointing down, those form an M. First person, let me get my fingers right again. First person, okay? First person, sorry. First person is I am the star of the story, or it's about me. I'm writing this story from my perspective, my point of view, some more P's. And you'll find that this story is written in the form of paragraphs to make a complete passage. So the question that we're going to look at today, I'll share my screen, but I want to show you something that many of you already have, so you don't have to start from scratch thinking about all these important P's. We said the purpose is a fictional story. The title was Peace and Quiet. The point of view, the perspective is written from first person. The plot is her problem. She, we find out, is not getting enough time alone and is being flooded with too much time with her brothers and sisters. Her family is getting on her nerves, and she just wants to go to a place, P, that allows her to have some peace and quiet. And so her place is at the edge of the forest. So that's why I have myself at the edge of a forest. She's sitting on a rock and trying to figure out how to play this song on her guitar. All right. So the question says, why is it so important that James, the brother in this story, is important to the plot, the rising action before the falling action, that James, let's take a close look at the question, that James knows about the clearing in the forest? Well, since we know that James is not the protagonist, the main character, because they asked about the plot, the main focus of the story, the center of attention, the big idea, what it's mostly or mainly about is Desha needing to be able to find some peace and quiet. So the question asks, why is it so important for James to find that same path that Desha did to get into this forest? So letter F says his knowledge reminds him of a place he can go when he needs help from a family member. A family member does not mention Desha, and so since that has nothing to do with our protagonist, it wouldn't be important to the plot if you're just talking about a family member. The problem is he's not needing help, he's giving help to a specific family member. And so I would eliminate that because that's the opposite of the plot. He's giving help, not needing help. G, his knowledge helps him recognize how quickly his sister is growing up. When I told you the problem, it had nothing to do with growing up. It had to do with, why can't people leave me alone? Why can't I have my own space where no one's going to bother me? And we find out when her conversation with her brother begins that he has his own room because their other brother, Daniel, has moved out. So since growing up wasn't the problem, it wasn't the plot, and we don't even know which sister is being talked about here, that's too vague. So if anything is vague, E has 3 sticks, you're going to eliminate 3 answers. So we've already eliminated F because he's giving help to a family member. We're going to eliminate G because the plot wasn't about growing up. H says his knowledge of that clearing in the forest, the path to where she's at, makes it possible for him to find Desha, our protagonist, who has a problem, and be able to talk to her. Now, since most of the story is about their conversation, then since it's him and Desha having a conversation about her problem, that's the best answer so far. So let's see letter J. His knowledge leads him to a place that reminds him of Daniel. Daniel is not the protagonist. He's not in the story. He's only mentioned one time that he moved out, so James has the room to himself, but 21% of the kids picked it. And so we have to make sure that our kids are able to see something. If you think of these P's, who is the main protagonist? It's a person in this case named Desha. Does she go to a certain place? Yes, she goes to the forest. Does she have a certain problem that we'll call the plot? Yes, she wants to be able to have time to herself. And if you notice, when I put those glasses there, it was just to remind myself to remove them. After the long conversation with James, her brother, it was like being able to take off your glasses. The world is not going to change back there behind me, but just the way I see it changes. And so she all of a sudden, in her quest to find peace and quiet in the forest, she doesn't really find peace and quiet until she's able to see life from a different point of view. The story's written in first person still, written by me, Desha, but my brother James helps me come at peace. And so the real peace in her heart and quietness of her soul does not come until the end of the story, which is just kind of my way of looking at. So my question for you is, what's your problem that makes you want to go away by yourself? Because we want to be able to relate every selection, every passage to students. A lot of kids don't like to be around other people. And what you might ask them to make it relevant and relatable is, what would make you want to go to a forest by yourself? Maybe not to sing or to play a song, but just to do something where no one's going to be bothering you, and why? And who is it that helps you keep a balanced perspective? The one that helps you bring your rising action to a falling action where your problem is solved. So hopefully, with all of those keys that I shared with you, just on from the palm of my hand and my fingers, we can process through the parts of the story and be able to see there's lots of P's that will help kids remember. So just have the ones who struggle just think of their palm of their hand and write down as many of those P's as they can. And at another time, we'll talk about how everything in a passage or selection ties together, regardless of what kind of passage it is. So do me a favor, share or tag one of your reading teacher friends who's working on one of those P's, specifically plot. So I'll take a moment before I say goodbye. If you can write this page number down, page 478 in the binder, the digital or the hard copy, whenever you're talking about the plot of a story that's fictional or a literary nonfiction, a poem, a play, anything where there's a sequence of an event happening, sometimes there's a plot inside there, and there's quite a few. As I was looking through this one, she kind of had a loss of her freedom because of everyone bothering her in her house. So she had to confront that problem by at first running away from it and the people who were causing it. And in the end, there was a transformation because of the help of her brother. So it would be great, probably for those of you reading teachers, to, as you're reading each story, have this cool poster in the reading journals or notebooks of your students so that they can each have an opportunity as they're reading the different types of stories and plays and poems and such to be able to identify what kind of plot is happening in here, because it's not always going to be just a problem. The problem can be part of one of these, but sometimes it could be something completely different. So do me a favor. It would bless me a lot if you would take the time to like the video on YouTube, since that's where you're watching it directly from. Like it on Facebook and share or tag one of your reading teacher friends. And then one more reminder, starting next week, I'm going to have the improve your reading scores by 30 to 50% in the next 30 to 50 days. And I'm going to have that for $30. And as I've done in my last video, go ahead and write your grade level that you teach, if you haven't already done it on my other video, in the comment section so that I can know where to focus a lot of my time. If the majority of you are coming from, let's say, third, fourth, and fifth, then I'll do more videos. I'm going to do videos for all grade levels, for all reading teaks and topics. But I think everyone can relate to the purpose, the point of view, the perspective, the passage, the paragraph, the plot, the protagonist, the problem, the perspective, and in the case of this topic and title, the peace and quiet that really only comes at the end instead of at the beginning, the top of the passage. God bless you guys and have a great